Sloth Uni! We're back with part 2 of the training camp battle watch. The next divisions up to bat are the AFC West and the AFC South. We have much to discuss as there's been so much traffic on all of these rosters during the offseason, and some of these teams may not have camp battles, but more so just stuff to pay attention to during camp. I'm going to have all of you prepped and ready by the time all these teams' training camps roll around, which is in a few weeks by the way. This is our last month without football. We're finally in the home stretch, ladies and gentlemen. Get comfortable, grab some food, and enjoy because class is now in session. Before we get into the training camp stuff, I just want to address the newest bit of breaking news going in and around the league. Former Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield has been traded to the Panthers for a 5th round pick. The Panthers and the Seahawks were my two main teams I had pegged in a move for Baker, and the Panthers made the most sense to me as they already had a roster to compete right now, and the NFC is weak. It's honestly the weakest it's been in a while. There will be teams that rise from the rubble and start a new wave of success in that conference, and the Panthers hope Baker can lead them there. I personally don't think he can, but there's been reports that they won't just hand him the starting job, which is a nod of respect to Sam Darnold, who will have the chance to defend his position. I ultimately believe Baker will win out before the camp is done, and we'll talk more about that in the upcoming NFC South segment, so stay tuned. The biggest holdup on this deal was the contract though. Baker was owed a large sum of money, and no team wanted to pay it all on a chance of him not panning out. The Browns had no choice but to either pay a substantial amount of his contract in order to conduct a trade, or just outright cut him. They gained nothing from cutting him and just chose to bite the bullet on the contract. The Browns are now left with Jacoby Brissett as their starter in the time that Deshaun Watson is gone due to an upcoming suspension. As a Dolphins fan, I can say that while Jacoby isn't the best option, people are overreacting about him being trash a tad bit. People forget he was also playing behind the worst offensive line in the league, right along with Tua last year, so his most recent work isn't very pretty. Not saying that they'll make the playoffs or even have a positive record, but the Browns have a great roster in place, and Brissett is a solid backup. The Browns will surprise a lot of people who think they'll just fall off the face of the earth next year. It's also the most Browns thing ever to trade away the quarterback who turned your franchise around, ended your 17-year playoff drought, and got you your first playoff win since 1994. Now I understand Baker wasn't playing very well before his injury, and especially not after his injury. He wasn't at an elite level, but you don't need elite level quarterback play to win a Super Bowl. The Panthers have potentially gotten themselves a steal. Potentially. There was talk of Baker being immature and not fit to lead an NFL franchise, but after this whole ordeal, he'll likely have matured a bit and put some things into perspective. Should he return to form, the Panthers could very well slide into the wild card this year. Their defense is very underrated and was being held back by a shoddy offense, and they have ample offensive pieces that were being held back by QB play. Not that Baker will provide a significant boost to their pass catchers, but his ability to keep the offense on the field and score points at a good rate will be more than enough of a boost. He is without a doubt the best quarterback this team has had since Cam Newton. Now, it's time to get into these camp battles, starting with the AFC West. We'll be going to orders of standing again, for the sake of fairness of course. So that means Kansas City Chiefs, it's your time to step up to the plate. The end of days are near for the Chiefs. Or not. With the departure of superstar Tyreek Hill to the Miami Dolphins, the Chiefs have been trying to go quantity versus the quality that they had in their attempts to replace Cheetah. Not to say that the people they've acquired aren't good, but in comparison to Hill, the statement fits. The fight for the number 2 option in the Andy Reid offense led by Patrick Mahomes will be underway in a few weeks. Earlier in the offseason, the Chiefs signed one of my top free agent wide receivers in Juju Smith-Schuster. He's still only 25, so he's very early in his career, but he's been skewed a bit by his role being reduced. With Big Ben's arm deteriorating, the Steelers went away from using Juju in the deeper routes he excelled from in the slot. Instead, he was used in the short and intermediate level. Boasting 1,400 yards in his second year, the talent and success is there, and he's with the QB who could very well pull it back out of him. People say he could never succeed as the number 1 option, and while I agree to an extent, he won't even be the one in KC with Travis Kelce still around and kicking. He won't just be handed a job though, as the Chiefs also drafted Sky Moore and undrafted free agent Justin Ross. Sky Moore was selected with a very premium pick in the 2nd round and is extremely talented, so you can't count him out of the race. Putting up damn near 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns in his last college year, and watching his tape, it's pretty easy to see how the Chiefs plan to use him. He's the clear favorite to replace Tyreek Hill's role in the offense with all the pre-snap movement and yak. Yards after catch for the slow rollers. I've always been a big Juju advocate, but Moore is immensely talented and should not be overlooked for what his role in this offense could be. On to Justin Ross, who is a dark horse of this race. He burst onto the college scene as a freshman at Clemson and was the leading receiver in a room that featured T. Higgins, Hunter Renfrow, and Travis Etienne. His collegiate career fizzled out after that due to injuries and his play on the field, but many thought he'd have first-round potential after his freshman year. But after some crazy injuries and inefficient seasons, he went on to go undrafted. The talent is there, we will just have to see if he can step it up at the professional level. He specifically chose to go to the Chiefs to have an opportunity to showcase his abilities. With Tyreek Hill gone, Mahomes will be spreading it out a bit more, but should any of these guys take hold of the second option spot, they could be in for a really big season. My bet is on Juju, but I wouldn't be shocked if any of these guys took the part. The other battle of note to watch on the Chiefs is surprisingly the lead back role. I initially thought that Clyde Edwards-Helaire would have this spot on Locksmith, but whispers around the team said newly acquired Ronald Jones could potentially secure the position for himself. I think Ronald Jones is a fine back and an efficient runner, but his main issue that has plagued him his whole career is fumbling. It's a big part of the reason he lost the job to Leonard Fournette in Tampa Bay. They were both very effective in their time being used, but Jones coughed up the ball too much for Bruce Arians' liking. With all that being said, I think he's more of an insurance option should Clyde get hurt again, and while he's been on the field, Clyde has been very effective for the Chiefs. And he's been underutilized by the offense, believe it or not. Once a wide receiver turned running back, he has a receiving ability that not many running backs have. But he's surprisingly not been used in the passing game, even though Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Clyde himself have all said they want him to get more involved. And while I'm still a firm believer in the talent of Clyde, it can't be ignored that the Chiefs have been trying to actively replace him since his rookie year. He was doing very well through the season and they essentially sabotaged them by signing Le'Veon Bell and having them split the work. Bell was incredibly uninspiring, but they needed running back depth and he was not too far removed from being elite at the time. Before they picked up Bell, Clyde was one of the top backs in total rushing yards, and it made no sense the time split that they had. I don't know what it is, but the Kansas City Chiefs simply refuse to believe in Clyde. If I had to take a guess, it'd be his size that prevents them from making him a true workhorse. But last season, he came into the season 47 pounds lighter than he usually plays at because of a gallbladder surgery that he had before the season. Even through this, before he got hurt, he was coming off of 2 back-to-back 100-yard games. Should he stay healthy, I believe he should keep his lead back role and maybe get even more involved. But the Chiefs' hatred for him knows no bounds at this point. The Las Vegas Raiders recently acquired Davante Adams from the Packers. He figures to be the number 1 for Derek Carr, but tight end Darren Waller was previously entrenched in that role. There's a few scenarios in how the targets could be split, and given Carr's tendency to hyper-target his number 1 option, I think it'll be a clear 1, 2, and a 3. With Davante being the 1, Waller the 2, and Hunter Renfrow being the 3. Another scenario is if Davante and Waller serve as the 1A and 1B, with Renfrow being the quote-unquote 2. Waller and Carr have developed some serious chemistry these past few seasons, and I don't expect that to just disappear overnight. Davante would be the 1A in this scenario, and with how talented he is, I don't see a way he isn't the top option for this team. Also with all the money they're paying him, but mostly the talent part. It should also be noted that Derek Carr and Davante Adams are very close friends and previously played together in college, so it's not like there's a new connection they have to develop. I expect Davante to have relatively the same numbers he's been putting up the past few seasons, especially with how much trust Carr historically has in his top option. And for those who think Carr can't eke out enough targets to support a 1A and 1B, look back to 2015 and 2016 when Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper finished with 130 plus targets apiece. The lowest the Derek Carr, our number 1 option, has finished on the season with targets is 101, with Crabtree hitting that mark in 2017 and Jared Cook hitting it in 2018. How much work will be left for Renfrow in either of these scenarios is something you should be looking out for as well. With Josh McDaniels coming in to be the head coach and his success with New England's ground and pound style, I love Josh Jacobs this year. He's in a contract year, so it's even more incentive for him to perform. The Raiders did not pick up his 5th-year option, so he's scheduled to hit the open market this upcoming season. I believe the Raiders will be pretty balanced but more run-heavy given McDaniel's success with the run schemes. It'll be important to watch the new scheme that the Raiders deploy because it'll have a trickle effect on the targets each pass catcher gets. Should they go more run-heavy, I can easily see the 1, 2, and 3 scenario. Should they get a little more pass-heavy? Given their current personnel, the 1A and 1B will be much more viable. I also want to point out that there's virtually no scenario that Hunter Renfrow is the 1 or the 2 unless there's an injury. No disrespect because he's an excellent player, but he was the 3rd option until the Henry Ruggs tragedy. It wasn't until there was more of a target share to eat from where he really started to shine. The LA Chargers don't have any battles of note per se, but they do have a few things you should be keeping an eye out for. The main thing I'm interested in is how this defense gels together. They've acquired a few big names to add to their fairly talented defense. They had stars at every level, but what their defense was lacking last year was the meat and potatoes of the defense. They already had stars and rising talent in Joey Bosa, Derwin James, Nazir Adderley, and Asante Samuel Jr., all on the team last year. but the rest of their defense was nothing special and it showed. They were tied for 3rd in the league with a whopping 27 points per game allowed last season. They've attempted to patch up their defense with a combination of stars and meat and potato talent, but it remains to be seen if they will all mesh and be great together. With new acquisitions of J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, Bryce Callahan, and Kyle Van Noy, the Bolts figure to have a much improved defense. But there are question marks with almost every single person they picked up. Justin Herbert has put up monster stats the past 2 seasons and missed the playoffs twice now. Should the defense not step up, they'll likely miss it again, especially with the AFC being much deeper this year. While it's hard to gauge people in the preseason, that will definitely go into the evaluation of this defense. If they can take that next step, I could see this team going very far. On the offensive side, the Chargers just gave wide receiver Mike Williams $20 million a year this offseason. He just recently outproduced counterpart Keenan Allen this season in yards and touchdowns on less targets and catches. Now Keenan has been nothing short of spectacular, but he's getting up there at age of 30, and nobody plays an elite level forever, and he's no exception. I'm not predicting that he'll fall off the face of the earth, and I still think he'll be very good this season, but Williams is entering his prime years and could take over as the #1 option for this team. He has the skill set to do it, and he just needs to stay healthy and become a more consistent player. I'll be on the lookout to see if reports say he's taking a step up in his game. Another offensive player to watch for is tight end Gerald Everett. The Chargers have been lacking a solid option at the position since Hunter Renfrow departed in 2020. Everett had previous success on the Rams while sharing work with Tyler Higbee. The Chargers offense has been all Keenan, Williams, and Eckler. They needed another solid option to step up to make them more consistent. Justin Herbert loves to carve up defenses in a short game and was very successful using Keenan, Hunter, and Eckler for that. Everett could fit into the short game role and can be used to stretch the field with the speed as well. The Chargers just recently drafted running back Isaiah Spiller, who I'm a big fan of, but I don't see him making too much of a dent in Austin Eckler's workload. Regardless though, he's a name to watch out for because they've been trying to find a nice complement to Eckler, and I really like him as a talent. The Denver Broncos have quite a few things going on this camp that I'll be paying very close attention to. Fresh off of a trade from the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson will be trying to establish a rapport with the Broncos wideouts. Neither of their wide receivers had previously established themselves as a top option on this team, partly because of injuries and partly because of QB play. Courtland Sutton has already had previous success in the league and reaching 1K yards before tearing his ACL the next season, and he has all the makings of a prototype #1, and seeing how successful Russ was with DK, it's easy to put 2 and 2 together viewing him as Russ's potential favorite target. But Jerry Jeudy is already regarded by many as an elite talent in this league. After a successful rookie season, his sophomore year was derailed by a high ankle sprain that few players ever return to peak level in the same season of sustaining it. If new head coach Nathaniel Hackett can find ways to get Jeudy open on deep routes, I can see him and Russ clicking very well. Russ has historically struggled with passes over the middle of the field, which is where I'd assume Jerry would do a lot of his work from. I think he'll play the Tyler Lockett role in this offense. And some may argue that Lockett was the one on the Seahawks, but on a week-to-week basis, DK was much more consistent than him. Now, I don't want to say Lockett was stat padding, but he was low-key stat padding with like 4 to 5 huge games a year with mediocre to average games filling up the rest of the season. Russ loves to work outside the numbers, and that's Sutton's bread and butter. Still, to me, it's a toss-up to who will become his favorite target. Taking a peek at their running back situation, many assume second-year running back Javonte Williams will just completely take over the backfield. The team brought back Melvin Gordon, who was the initial leader in a 60-40 share that dwindled down to 50-50 later in the season. Now, I don't think this team would have brought back Gordon if they had no intentions of utilizing him very frequently. I think it'll go back to being a 60-40 share again, but this time with Williams being the lead back. Nathaniel Hackett is known to love using a tandem backfield in his offenses, and in today's league, it's been a growing trend. It keeps everyone fresh and prolongs your running back's lifespan in the league. Running backs already hit a mean decline around the age of 30, and the last thing you want to do is chip away at his expiration date from overutilization. It's not like Melvin Gordon was even just utter garbage the last time we saw him on the field. He was very productive in his time split, just as Javonte was. The Denver Broncos don't care about your fantasy football rosters, they care about winning games. And using multiple running backs has proven time and time again to be an incredibly effective method to run the backfield. Now we're getting down dirty in the AFC South. Starting off with the Tennessee Titans. For some odd reason, people have just been utterly disrespecting the Tennessee Titans. They're coming off being the #1 seed in the AFC just this previous season and the #4 seed the year before that. AJ Brown was not the sole contributor to their success. I suspect the main reason people are so down on the Titans is that they still have their doubts about Ryan Tannehill. The Titans drafted some competition for him in Malik Willis in this past year's draft and effectively put him on notice after a disappointing playoff loss. I doubt Willis will make a legitimate push for the starting spot through training camp, but it could be something to monitor. But the main battle I'm interested in on this team is between Robert Woods and Treylon Burks. Robert Woods is coming off of an ACL tear but is on pace to start the season. He's a very talented wide receiver and fits well with what the Titans do on offense. He's also the type of wide receiver that Tannehill has previously connected with in Jarvis Landry. Robert Woods has been one of the most consistent wide receivers over the past few years. He was coming off of back-to-back 1K seasons and just barely missed 1K in 2020 before he tore his ACL in 2021. But he's getting up there in age at 30, and sustaining an injury like that isn't good. But by all accounts, he's recovering well. Whether he's the one or the two, I think he'll be a very solid contributor for this team. Now, Treylon Burks is almost a carbon copy of A.J. Brown, and the Titans hope he's just as talented. But he's had problems finishing practices at the professional level due to asthma. But he wouldn't be the first NFL player to have asthma. Many others have found a way to work through it and lead successful careers. He was my number one wide receiver coming out of this draft. He wasn't the most technically sound receiver and didn't test elite athleticism at the combine, but when you turn on the tape, he's electrifying and just makes plays on the field. I think people are blowing the asthma thing a little out of proportion because he played his entire career with it, did he not? I think he just has to get acclimated to NFL practice and work. I still believe he'll be the number one option for this team and his talent will flash in camp and especially during the preseason. I'm not saying he's going to set rookie records or anything, but literally last year people were blasting Jamar Chase for dropping balls in preseason. Should Treylon Burks turn into the player I believe he can be, the Titans won't miss A.J. Brown one bit. Moving on to another one of their players coming back off an injury though. Derrick Henry had broken a bone in his foot mid-season last year and came back for their sole playoff game. But it didn't look like he was back to his old self. If he's lost a step from the injury or isn't back to fully 100%, then the Titans could actually be in trouble. Henry is the engine that makes this team go. They go as he goes, and if he isn't the player he once was, they might be looking at a lottery pick. I do think he'll bounce back just fine though, but you never know. He had quite a hefty workload the past 2 seasons and it could be coming back to him. But as long as they have Derrick Henry and their defense continues playing at an elite level, the Titans will be A-OK. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. They don't have any camp battles that I'm interested in, but I will be paying very close attention to how their new starting quarterback Matt Ryan is looking in his 15th season at 37 years old. I think people are gassing this team just a tad bit. Yes, they have an extremely talented running back and defense. Yes, they also have a really good young ascending wide receiver, but they also have their 5th quarterback in just as many years. I think this season will go very similarly to how Phillip Rivers' tenure went with this team. This will likely be Matt Ryan's last year in the league, and the Colts will have their 6th quarterback in 6 years next season. The question is though, is Matt Ryan able to perform at a high level still? From what I saw in the Falcons, I'd say no. He didn't have the best supporting cast, but he's been on the decline, and historically, once a player starts declining, they usually don't go back up. And apart from Michael Pittman Jr., the Colts wide receiver core is pretty mid. People have speculated that Julio Jones could reunite with Matt Ryan in Indy, but have they forgotten that Julio is the one that wanted to leave Atlanta because, and I quote, "I want to play with a big-armed quarterback who can deliver the deep ball." That sounds like a shot to an aging quarterback to me. Now, while Matt Ryan can still deliver the deep ball, he can no longer do it on a consistent basis that he used to be able to. Whether it be by design, lack of ability, or lack of personnel, the Falcons have aired the ball out a lot less since Julio Jones departed. But it seems like Julio just simply didn't want to play with Matt Ryan anymore. People aren't taking into consideration that the Colts could have just downgraded at quarterback. Talk all you want about how inadequate Carson Wentz was last season, he still performed better than Matt Ryan with arguably worse weapons. Should Matt Ryan struggle this season, I could see them finishing 3rd in their divisions behind the Titans and the Jaguars. The Houston Texans at first glance may appear like they have nothing to offer, but if you look a little closer, grab a magnifying glass, catch the sun beaming in just the right spot, you'll see that this team has some very interesting nuggets. Starting with their quarterback Davis Mills, who quietly had a decent rookie season. He had, in my opinion, the 2nd best rookie season of all the quarterbacks right behind Mac Jones. He may not be the flashy choice to take a next step, but the kid can play. He sure looked a hell of a lot better than some other rookie quarterbacks. I don't think he'll stay ahead of some guys like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence going into their 2nd year, but his development is definitely something to watch. After Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow came into the league guns blazing, it's easy to forget that most rookies just don't come into the league playing at a high level. People have been trying to speed cook talent, but history shows that taking the time to develop talent is an extremely viable way to create stars. Not saying that Mills is the second coming of Brady, but he can etch out quite the career for himself. It's hard to succeed in this league, and he's already shown at the bare minimum that he can hang. He already has an exceptional wide receiver in Brandon Cooks to rely on, and the Texans just drafted a wide receiver who I was very high on in this draft process. I was never sold if this guy could become a superstar in the league, but one thing I knew for certain was that he'd have success. John Mechie has had my eye for damn near all his time at Alabama. He first caught my eye when I was scouting out for Tua, and he impressed every step of the way after that. The guy just makes plays. He may not be the biggest, fastest, or strongest guy on the field, but he has just a knack for shaking his defender, finding soft spots in zones, and getting yak, which is yards after catch for those who failed a few grades. And not to mention he has industrial glue on his gloves. Cause whew, this kid can catch, man. His NFL comp for me is Julian Edelman or Jarvis Landry. I'll be paying very close attention to how he's coming along in camp. I can see him seriously challenging Cook for targets. With two solid wide receivers, you could very well see a jump in Mill's stats. Now the Texans' backfield is quite possibly the least attractive thing I could ever think of. But here at Sloth University, we thrive at finding diamonds in the rough. The Twitter fingers out there will be telling you that 4th round running back Dameon Pierce has a clear path to being the workhorse on his team. But Sloth Uni sees some hidden potential from another running back on this roster. Just because a prospect goes to a good situation doesn't mean they will have success. I wasn't a fan of Pierce coming out of college. He was a tough runner, but he seemed to be only as good as his blockers allowed him to be. He doesn't have great breakaway speed and has very little wiggle. There isn't much to like about this backfield, but if I were to take a shot on anybody, it would without a doubt be Marlon Mack. The only negative about him, which history isn't on his side for this one, is that he's coming off of an Achilles tear. And for running backs, that has been the toughest injury to come back from. And most, if not all of them, didn't do much with their career post-injury. He's only 26 and is now 2 years removed from the injury. Most forget, and if they didn't forget, they choose to ignore. But he was extremely productive as the Colts workhorse before his injury. He was so good that now superstar Jonathan Taylor was not going to start the season over him and was likely to have a minuscule role in the offense behind him. But Mack tore his Achilles, Taylor got his time to shine, and the rest is history. If, and it's a big if, Mack recovers well from his injury, I could easily see him taking over a stranglehold of this offense and finishing as a 1K rusher. Finally, there's always a handful of teams that go out and surprise you every season. And the more I think about it, I see the Jacksonville Jaguars as one of those teams. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll be quite the pushovers they were in this previous season. But they'll only go as far as their second-year quarterback Trevor Lawrence takes them. He was in competition with Zach Wilson for the worst rookie quarterback last season. Many will give him a pass for everything that was going on in the organization, but there are many times his overall decision-making looked very putrid. I will though give him a pass for being a rookie because he very much looked like one. He did, however, show flashes of what could be. The team went out and got Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram for some added receiving help, and returning wide receivers Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault finished routing out what appears to be a very solid receiving core. The big question is who will take the step into the number one role. Last year was Marvin Jones, but he's also getting up there in age as well at 32, so it may be time for a young bull to take the reins. If I had to take a guess, it'd be Laviska Shenault, who I believe has all the talent to become the number one of this team, but just wasn't utilized to the best of his abilities with prior management. Or it could be Christian Kirk, who I was a fan of coming out of Texas A&M. Kirk had success coming into the league meshing with Kyler Murray, but was never able to take the next step into being a top option for a team. He did, however, excel in stretching the field and being a deep threat from the slot, which is where Laviska primarily worked from last year. If they plan on moving Laviska all over the field, which they should have done a long time ago, he could very well become the one for this team. He's only 23 and is coming into his third season, so he could be due for a breakout year. Many thought it would happen this previous year, but there weren't many things going well for the Jaguars for obvious reasons. He's a playmaker and has the potential to be very dominant. Reports from OTAs are that he's the 4th wide receiver on the depth chart, but he's also been Lawrence's go-to target. I'll be paying attention if his success continues in the camp and even into the preseason. Should Trevor take the next step in his development, I could see him being a borderline 4K yard quarterback, if not a little over. His top target will be very valuable. We have another victim of the feared Achilles tear coming up. Jaguars running back James Robinson suffered an Achilles tear late last season. I'm not sure if he'll even be able to start the season, much less participate in training camp. If he participates in the preseason, I'd be very surprised, but it would be a very good sign for him going into the season. He's a candidate to start the season on a pup, and if that happens, it could pave the way for second-year running back Travis Etienne. He missed the entirety of his rookie year with a Liz Frank foot injury and didn't play a single snap. Most analysts, not me, had him ranked ahead of Steelers running back Najee Harris and Broncos running back Javonte Williams during the draft process. I still very much liked him as a prospect, but I just preferred those two over him. He still has the ability and opportunity to prove me wrong though. Should he have this whole backfield to himself if Robinson isn't ready to go, Etienne could be in for a big comeback season. He'd probably be my vote for comeback player of the year, honestly. If Robinson is able to start the season or come back in any capacity, it remains to be seen just how effective he'll be. The Achilles tear for a running back is a dangerous one, but either way, this Jaguars offense has the potential to be very explosive. And with that, we've concluded all of our AFC teams for training camp battles and injury watch. Stay tuned for the first half of NFC teams, in which we'll be covering the NFC South and NFC North. As always, if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out our Twitter at Sloth University and our TikTok using the same handle for some extracurricular activities. Most importantly, stay safe and spread love. Class dismissed.
All right, kid, here's the deal. At any given time, there are around 1,500 aliens on the planet, most of them right here in Manhattan. And most of them are decent enough. They're just trying to make a living.
Cab drivers?
No, not as many as you'd think. Humans, for the most part, don't have a clue. They don't want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good bead on things.
But why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
The person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.